Hola, Carly. How are you?
Hi, Rose. I'm good, and you?
Good, good. It's nice to see you. Great. We are now on the LinkedIn Live, and this is all about speaking about talent retention. And the reason why I wanted to have you today is because I know you work mostly with Latin American clients. We could be doing this in Spanish, but we're going to do it in English. And um, and what I found really interesting is that we're everything about talent retention, and I feel like every region has to work on talent retention differently from how it is done, like in South Africa or in other regions. So I really like that angle that you have to bring in terms of Latin America. And then also something that you have different is that you're a consultant, but you work mostly with corporate as opposed to small to medium sized businesses, which is usually what we do. So I'd love to hear, from you in terms of, that corporate world and how talent retention in Latin America for corporates is looking like. So yeah, I'd love to hear first a little bit about yourself to tell people who you are, what you do, and where you mostly work with, your experience in HR, and we take it from there.
Thank you so much, Rose, for having me. Well, my name is Carla Paganoni. I actually live in South Africa, but yeah, like Rose mentioned, I have a lot of clients in Latin America. I've worked around 8 years in PepsiCo in different parts of the world, including Mexico, South America, the US as well, Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And like I said, right now I live in South Africa, but I do have a lot of clients in Latin America, and I love to work with clients from my region because I obviously like connect a lot with them. And yeah, I've been doing consulting work for more or less 2 years. When I resigned the company, I just was so passionate about making an impact that yeah, I decided to go and do some consulting work with different companies. And it's been an amazing journey, I must say.
Nice. Lovely to hear about your background. When it comes to talent retention, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how do you identify the companies that you work for? What are the key factors that are influencing the kind of employee turnover in a company? So what very much why people are leaving? So what's the type of work that you do to identify that in corporates and Latin America?
Yeah. Well, to give a little bit of context, and we kind of like zooming out, we're living kind of like a great resignation, right? Where 77 percent of employees are leaving their jobs, and this is out of a study that was done by the Gallup survey. And out of the 77, another study done by the Global OCC, we have the reasons for leaving, the reason for resignation are divided into three: the economic aspect, the growth aspect, and the emotional aspect. And we see normally, that number one and number two are the economical aspects and the growth aspects, right? So people are looking for a better salary, and they're looking for better growth opportunities. But what we're seeing now, and I think it's also been kind of like um, more and more since COVID, it's the emotional aspect. So people are looking more for more of a balanced life. And also, we're seeing a lot of burnout, especially in corporate companies. So people are obviously like looking for, they value more a job where they're gonna know that they're not gonna have like a physical and mental burnout, and they're gonna have a better balance in their lives than even a better salary or a better growth opportunity. So that's one of the tendencies that I think it's super interesting. And yeah, I think it's something good, because it's also, you know before it was kind of like, if a company offered you a job, you had to be thankful, and it was like there was no space for negotiation, right? And now it's the other way around. It's like companies kind of like have to um you know yeah, like tell employees why they are the best choice for them. And I
Mm.
think that's a very good thing, because then it like raises the bar for the rest of the companies, and obviously that um turns in a better life for everyone.
Mm. Yes, I hear what you're saying, and I think that kind of links with with this thing of like people, you see people resign, but they work in some sort of like independent type of agreement. And I think that's very much people saying, okay, but this is done, kind of in my terms, and not following the standard kind of like you get a contract that says a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and now it's like, okay, I engage with you, but from a different kind of format and kind of legal agreement. And yeah, I take that is because, as you said, from an emotional point of view, people want the kind of life-work balance. And when it starts with that kind of legal agreement or saying what is that we're going to be working with, but you from as being an independent, there's more room for negotiation. And something that I think it rings very true from what you're saying is that there's almost like no way to deny that there are certain needs that people have that need to be met in order for them to be like in an optimal space to perform at work. So, remote working being one of those where like we all have our personal admin, we all have kids to attend to, so we cannot not have time. We can afford to not have time to do that. And all of that needs to be sorted, especially when you have households with like double income where both parents are working. And so that's kind of a reality that we're kind of all facing, and companies need to kind of adjust to make sure that they are addressing the needs of the people and know that as long as that's covered, then people can come to work and kind of focus on adding value to the business.
Completely. And I think, I mean, also another study that was done on like who were the kind of like happiest employees, they spoke about balance, I don't know, not about employees actually, sorry, it was just like what makes people happy in general, okay, around the world. And what they found out was that it was actually balance. The happiest people are not the the richest people, which that's normally the thinking that people have, that if you are rich then you're gonna be happy, or the people that have the most achievements, or the happiest people are the people that have the most balanced lives. The people that get to exercise, the people that get to spend time with their families, the people that get to a job where they have a a good income, etc., etc. So I think I think that's where we're going. I've also done a lot of work in corporate companies regarding agility. So how do we focus on work that is actually meaningful? Because sometimes we can, we realize that we are in meetings all day, that we have 1,000 emails to get, to get to. And then the meaningful work that gets kind of like pushed out, or you have no time to focus on it. So it's also about how do you prioritize? How do you make sure that you are focusing on value at work, and how do you get rid of the things that are non-value, especially in corporate companies where you have a lot of priorities because you have different regions. So you have global telling you, okay, these are our priorities, and then you have, in this case, Latin America, and then you have the country, and then you have your boss, and then you have your own priorities. So that's why, for me, kind of like what I'm seeing is like the balance. It's super important, and that's where the where companies kind of like need to work on. And a way of doing that is through agility. And also another thing that I think it's interesting, and that I think that if you did this in a company 30 years ago, they would think that you're crazy. It's kind of like giving employees tools for kind of like self-regulation. They didn't teach us how to like manage our emotions when we were kids. They didn't teach us about self-love. They didn't teach us about all of this. And this, funny enough, has an impact at at your job. So that is also something that I'm doing and that I love, is to give people tools how to regulate themselves, how to come back from a state of stress, from a state of anxiety, and yeah, just work from a place where they are at peace and calm, and that obviously will make them do their most meaningful work.
How do we, when you do these workshops for your clients, how do the employees that are receiving the workshop, what do they say? How do they take on when you talk about things that are really personal to them, but they're in the work environment, they have colleagues around them, so there's maybe this perception that they need to perform, but now they're opening up. Do they take on well? How does that go?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because normally I have like different generations in a workshop. So the kind of like the older generations are more like, yeah, they're a little bit like, okay, what are we doing right now? It doesn't feel like we're working, because when
Mm,
you're at work, it's supposed to be like hard, it's supposed to be stressful, and now we're kind of like changing that approach. So I would say like, yeah, like your maybe like millennials are more like open about it, and yeah, and super receptive, and maybe the older generations are a little bit more, they like it, but they're
mm,
like a little bit hesitant of, okay,
mm,
what are we doing, is this actually work?
mm.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting, and yeah.
Nice. Lovely to hear. Okay, moving on to the next question that I have for you. What are some of those? I mean, we've been speaking about it, but kind of innovative strategies that you have that you implemented at your clients to improve their talent retention?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did mention it. It's kind of like this. You would say like soft skills, but it's actually not even a soft skill, because it's kind of like more. Um, yeah, well, I guess it is. It's like managing emotions, but it's also this part around agility. So it is more of, this. Let's talk a little bit more about like the technological companies, no, or the companies that are the most agile around the world. And by agile, I mean they focus completely in their clients and their consumer. So they have their priorities super, super clear, kind of like the client is like the boss, we
Mm,
listen to what the boss has to say, and the boss is the client. So, for example, a company like Amazon, or a company like Google, actually, Jeff Bezos was saying, like, we are not centered in the client. We are not focused in the client. We are obsessed with the client. Everything revolves around the client. And even if we look at a company like Netflix, for example, what they're doing is that, like, they're constantly taking information on their consumer. If you go into your Netflix, it's not going to be the same your Netflix, Rose, that my Netflix.
mm,
It's going to look different. Even the photographs that you see in each of the movies, it's going to be different for you, then it's going to be different for me, and it's going to be different for my husband. Why? Because we look at different things, we have different interests. So obviously what Netflix does is it takes that information, and what they're trying to do is kind of like get you to, watch more movies. So
mm,
it's different from everyone, and that's kind of like the um, consumer obsession that I think each company has to have, and that yeah, it's kind of, it needs to have, each company needs to have a transformation from moving to, okay, I'm going to listen to the CEO and the boss and my boss, to I'm going to listen to my clients and my consumer in an obsessive way. And yeah, the companies that do this are actually the ones that are, the most successful in the majority of cases. Also, the companies that are that have the happiest employees as well, because once again, they are listening to their employees as much as they
mm,
listen clients outside, in the market, they listen to their employees. And once again, kind of like what the conclusion that we see is this part of balance.
mm,
And I think it's not, I want to clarify that it's not balance as in, okay, I, boss, will let you, Rose, go
mm,
for an hour to your kids school to watch them on play. No, it's not about me letting you, and it's not about me giving you permission. It's, you are going to do, whatever works for you, because I trust you, and we work by objectives, and that's it. And I think that's still a bit hard, and that's still um something that we need to work on with companies, that has to do with that agile mindset as well.
mm,
So basically, like, the agile components are this consumer obsession, um this empowering as well to your employees, that has to do with this balance, and finally this kind of like feedback that we get constantly, like I said, from our clients, and from also our employees. It's all
mm,
about feedback. It's all about listening, 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 and
mm,
evolving from that
mm.
feedback. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, I'd say we work a lot with leaders on agility, and yeah, and kind of like balance towards employees, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and it's interesting to hear, how that corporate angle, because when you work with small, medium-sized businesses, you have a pretty good understanding as HR. This is the team that you're taking care of, and these are the leaders that you're working with. But when it comes to corporate, I guess that there's a little bit more of like, how do you magnify that impact, and also how do you make sure that there are things not slipping through the cracks, also logistically, right? If you have remote working in place and things like that, there's a lot of connotations to that. But at the same time, when it comes to the new generations coming into work, there's also this trend in the world where populations are not growing necessarily, meaning that people are having less kids, right? Not Africa, the rest of the world. So that means that, for example, I started thinking about this because of remote working being like, corporates mostly want people back in the office, less flexibility like that. But if you think of new generations, young professionals that are not having kids, and yes, they kind of commit, there's a massive link in between their life purpose with whatever value they can add in the workplace, right? So I guess there's less friction for people, newer generations that don't have kids and they're young professionals and want to have linked to a big mission in their lives, to say, yeah, I don't have a problem, going into the office, making that really my kind of my community, my network, and where work happens and life happens as well. So yeah, I guess there's a lot that we will see unfolding in our generation when it comes to these things of how it self-regulates, right? All these different trends that we are seeing.
Yeah.
I'd also love to hear, based on these things, about the strategies that you use for talent retention. How do you see Latin America being different from other regions that you work with when it comes to retention in particular?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, the part of the balance, with personal and work life is something that I see everywhere in the world, and I think it would be a competitive advantage for everyone. Yeah, every company, because every time I see, I work with companies. I mean, Africa, Middle East, Europe, Latin America. Like, I see this as a constant, It's like, and I mean, I'm talking about corporate, specifically. It's, there's too much work, There's more work than hours in the day. So obviously, it's, I mean, super overwhelming, and it's something, like I said, that at least in Latin America, the numbers are telling us that this would be a competitive advantage there. But I think it's a constant around the world. I would say maybe the difference in Latin America is, I think it's very important, kind of like, to give space for people to kind of like talk and have like this like human connection. I think that would be something that, you know as Latin Americans, we like to connect, and we like to touch, and we like to hug, and we like to, it's like, it's kind of like much more in us than in other, in other countries maybe. So I would say that this is something that, specifically with COVID, it was kind of like taken away, because people were working remotely from their homes. And then we kind of saw that, a lot of them kind of like missed that interaction, and it's kind of like how also like the culture is built, at least in Latin America, from people interacting in the workplace, and not so much kind of like remotely. So I think that's something that's, we could think that we're going backwards in Latin America, because I think it's super important for people to have the flexibility to work from home. But yeah, we realize that it's something that's also quite important, to build in a culture where you feel close to people, and that's what people want. They want that closeness. So yeah, I think that having that in mind, when, to whatever intervention we do, it's super important at that time.
Yeah, I find that so funny because I'm also in HR and I am Latin American, but I never did work like specifically with Latin American companies. I've always done work for here in South Africa, in the UAE, also European companies. And it's so funny because I always said if I would have opened a consultancy back home, I would have to be doing such different work from what I do,
Mm,
based on the fact that here you kind of have to really give spaces for people to speak up and
mm,
kind of push people to tell you what they're feeling, what they're thinking, how for you to be able to retain them, and in Latin America it feels like the work that you need to do is completely the opposite, where you need to ask
yeah,
people to please stop speaking.
yeah,
And yeah, because we
mm,
are very kind of open and out there, which kind of leads for conflict to happen more like easier in between
eh,
colleagues, or when there are misunderstandings, people don't shy away from saying, just being too abrasive to say it in a way.
mm,
So it's such a different type of HR intervention. But I think, as HR, you obviously want to grab onto that, that people are open to speak up. And I guess it's all about creating that awareness to say, like conflict resolution and facilitation, and really working with creating that mindset of like, cool, it's
mm,
okay to speak up, but let's just make sure that we have, like an aim to this discussion, and that we're just not gonna go on and on. And
mm,
so creating those spaces where people can say what they need to say, but also
mm,
know that, for everything that you said, there needs to be substance and also an outcome that you're expecting to come out of the discussion. Yeah, so very, very interesting about Latin America. But I think what's interesting in your case is that when you work with corporates that come from a mindset of other regions, right? Because usually it's, I would say, in Latin America, you have American companies coming and having regions in Latin America or other regions as well. So when you
mm,
have company culture that dictates something, but then you work in a country that has, or a region that has a different style to it, right?
mm.
I often find that, that's an interesting thing. How do you go about it? What's more important, like the culture from the country in terms of how the work style takes place, or is
Mm.
it that there's a very clean directive list, and in this company this is how we do, and people have to abide to it? What do you see most?
So I think, yeah, when it's like a global company or American company or whatever, I mean, the people that are sitting there, they need to think a lot about what they are cascading. Like if they're gonna do it for Latin America, they do need to be mindful of the cultural differences.
Yeah.
It can be, and it can be as something as silly as sometimes, I don't know, it happened to me that they would do this like initiative, and they would put a name onto it, and it was in English, and then when you cascade it to Latin America, then kind of like some of the people don't actually connect with it because it's in English instead of, and are we going to translate it? No. So what are we going to do about it? We translate it in the countries, and we use it in the countries translated. Obviously it's the wherever they go. If they go to Brazil, for example, they would have to translate it to Portuguese as well. uh, but it's I think yeah, I think there's obviously room for that, because the objective is for people to take on those programs and those initiatives. So I would say there's a lot of room to kind of like make make it like your own in the country without changing like the umbrella, the design, or the name in English, or so I think, but I was gonna say something when you were mentioning like the differences between Latin America and other places. I think kind of like in Latin America, you don't have that boundary between like work and personal life. Like people want to be so close, and they want to know, kind of like, if I know about your life, like that makes me feel close to you,
Yeah.
and I think like in other parts of the world, it's like, no, I'm coming here to work, and we will have
Mhm.
a good relationship, a work relationship, but that's it. I'm not gonna ask you about your family or about whatever else, and I think that's something that in Latin America is very much appreciated.
Yeah,
Yeah, generate
I
closeness.
agree. Something that I've also noticed from our region is that the concept of punctuality In the countries like Argentina, Uruguay, probably Chile as well, that region, more the southern side. I wouldn't be able to speak so much about central, but it's okay to be a few minutes late, right? Like it's not necessarily a problem not to be on the dot if you have a meeting at 9. If you are 9:05, it's fine, things happen, we're here, let's not talk about it, and it's not an issue. But the reason behind that is not because Latin Americans wants to be disrespectful of time. It's because the way we conceive time is that if you're doing something, in order to close that something and to make sure that was, let's say, well done, you need to make sure that there's an unfolding of emotions with the person that you're interacting and that you're giving closure. So that might take a little bit longer and might delay you for your next thing, but it feels like, cool, this is how we finish this process, and now we can move into the next one. It will feel rude to say, okay, listen, we're kind of getting there, but we need more time, but I have something to hop on by. That will never do that. Like, we respect that, that connectivity and interaction that we have right now, and then we close that to move into the next one. So that is, a very interesting way as also how we perceive time and kind of achievement, as opposed to other cultures that it's like, less focused on the connection and being like, get it done, follow times and things like that. But I'm sure that it might create clashes with other regions. But to close up, I'd love to hear from you in terms of, once you put these initiatives in place in the region to retain talent, and now you have to go back to whoever, hire your services or the leaders that you're working with to kind of digest this information that you're producing. How do you go about that reporting to very much say, this is how we better retention for this company?
Yeah. So I think, I think the return of investment just in general in HR, sometimes people kind of want something quick, they want to see a change. If you implemented this initiative, yeah, I want to see the results tomorrow, and I think that's something that, we kind of like need to, like teach clients that unfortunately it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something, a culture takes years and years and years to build. So if you want to change something from the, kind of like the root, then it's also going to take some years. So I think it's something that, clients need to be aware. And normally when I take on a client, I am very clear on this, and it's not going to be a quick fix. It's something that it's going to require us to be super committed for 1 year, 2 years, whatever. And it's something that's going to require us to change behaviors. It's not just, okay, I'm going to do this program or I'm going to do this intervention, and then it's going to be, we're going to see different results. So I think that's something to have in mind. Obviously, we always want to see data, to measure, what happens. So kind of like a pre and a post evaluation is something that we always do. And I mean, to be honest, we do see changes quite quickly, but sometimes it's just like the how to say, it's just like the excitement effect, you know what I mean? It's just, I've just received this intervention, just received this program, so I'm gonna change the next few weeks, but then I forget. So for me, like I said, if we want the change to be from the root of the problem, and we want something that it's long term, then it's something that we want to measure, in a few years time, and to follow up and to kind of like keep doing interventions constantly, so that it's something that's profound. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like kind of that sustainable approach, is that it's not that one intervention is going to give you like such high impact that there's that kind of commitment to like, okay, this is what's, it changed my life now, this is how I see things, or how I look at work differently. It's all about that kind of walking the journey with people, being with them, for them to know that you're there with them. You're not going away. Like, this is staying. It wasn't a once-off. I guess that's what the most kind of transformational results can give, which obviously can be challenging for HR because of probably the scale and the numbers that you're working with in terms of people and interventions. But I guess that, again, that adds to that retention factor, where you probably can go back to the data and say, give examples of like certain retention rates in terms of turnover for people that you did your interventions with, maybe
Mm.
specific departments that have a higher turnover rate,
Yeah.
and then to decrease that. And I guess that's what, looking back, again with a more bigger period of time, you can see the effect of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also like like more the engagement, because actually like in these corporate companies, like their turnover is not bad, you know. It's and they I mean it's like the turnover that they have is kind of like healthy, but it's more
Mm,
like this like quiet resignation, you know, where people are not committed, people are burning out, or people, you know, so it's not like a voluntary resignation, but there are other types of yeah, of resigning to a job, you know, without leaving the
mm,
job. So I think it's more
mm,
about doing the most meaningful work, and also, you know, being the happiest that you can
mm.
be at your job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting to hear. Cool. That was so lovely to hear about, the work retention in Latin America, as well as, the corporate world. Um, Anything else from your side that you would like to add to the subject?
I think I just want to say, like, it excites me a lot to see how things are changing for the better, and how companies
Mm,
are kind of like willing to do this like new things, and especially like I said before, you know, around you know, balance and the quality of life, and you know, teaching these things that, you know, no one taught us
mm,
before. So I think that is amazing, and that's definitely
mm,
kind of yes, like a little bit, you know, putting a little bit of yourself to change the world, you know.
mm.
So yeah, but it was super interesting to to have this conversation with you, Rose, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so lovely to have you here. I have the perspective on small businesses, and to hear that, corporates are also, taking on this type of initiatives to consider of retention, better retention. It is really nice to hear. Cool. Thank you so much, Carla. We're going to stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you. Bye.